Amid the ongoing diplomatic standoff with Canada, India has ramped up its crackdown on Khalistani terrorists. The government of India has asked all of its investigating agencies to cancel their overseas citizens of India cards so that they cannot enter India. Apart from this, the government has also asked for the confiscation of properties owned by the identified terrorists and their families in India. The development comes shortly after India's National Investigation Agency seized the property of the wanted terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Punjab. Now, earlier this week, security forces launched raids on several locations of gangsters and terrorists operating from Canada. Separately, reports have surfaced that say the United States, along with other Five Eyes group partners, shared intelligence that led Canada to allege a potential Indian hand in the killing of the Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, Nijjar was killed in Canada's Vancouver in June of this year. In an interview to CTV News, U.S. Ambassador to Canada David Cohen said, and I quote, "There was shared intelligence among Five Eyes partners that helped lead Canada to making the statements that the Prime Minister made," unquote. Now, earlier this week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the Canadian Parliament that Ottawa has credible allegations for a potential link between Indian government and the killing of Nijjar, who was a Canadian citizen. India rejected the claims as absurd and motivated. This triggered a diplomatic standoff between the two countries. Now, both the nations expelled each other's intelligence chiefs, issued travel advisories for citizens. India even went on to suspend issuing new visas for Canadian citizens. Other Western nations initially refrained from speaking on the matter, but in recent days, the United States and other members of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing group have asked India to cooperate with Canada to get to the bottom of the matter. India, on the other hand, demanded Canada to act to contain anti-India and separatist extremism in the country. New Delhi has called Canada a safe haven of terrorists, given that Ottawa has repeatedly failed to act on the leads provided by India to nab, extradite and contain Khalistani terrorists. On the Nijjar case, India has asked Canada to share the evidence that potentially links New Delhi to the murder. Canada says it has already shared the information weeks ago, but the Indian side says the information lacked any specifics. Earlier, the Premier of Canada's British Columbia region, where the killing took place, also refused to share any specifics on the case, saying all the information on the case is already in the public domain, a matter of frustration. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is the highest-ranking U.S. official to have spoken on the matter so far. He has requested India's cooperation in the investigation. Now, for more on this, we have with us AMB Anil Trignayat, Distinguished Fellow of the Vivekananda International Foundation. He is joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for being with us, sir. Now, New Delhi has stepped up its activity against the Khalistani terrorists in India. What does this mean for the India-Canada relations?
Well, at the moment, as you know, the relationship is at its lowest, and for which the credit goes to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who leveled these allegations, which it calls credible allegations, which in my view is a misnomer and is a paradox of sorts. I mean, you don't have any credibility in these kind of allegations when you don't have an evidence or substantive material to present in order to reinforce your arguments. And that's precisely the case with him. I mean, in order to have his political expediency and to cater to these extremists and terrorists who constitute a very large part of his political backup, and So he has created this kind of a rift. It is extremely difficult for India not to respond in kind because it directly impacts on our sovereignty. It creates problems for us. It generates a separatist movement, a secessionist mentality. The funding comes from there. And this is something that we have to be extremely careful. And that's what precisely India is doing. And globally, the world is recognizing it. Even though these Five Eyes, I hope that whatever information they have collected or have so-called information is in fact has been done with their eyes open.
Yes.
Because frankly, if it was an information which was credible, it would have been shared by now.
Right. Now, amid a crackdown on the Khalistani operatives in India and abroad, India's National Investigation Agency is also probing their financial activities. Now, the probe has revealed that gangsters and terrorists generate their money through extortion and smuggling. This money not only funds their violent acts in India and abroad, but also invested in yachts, movies, and even the Canadian Premier League. Some of it was also invested in clubs and bars in Thailand. The agency has listed 13 instances from 2019 to 2021 when amounts ranging from $500,000 to 6 million Indian rupee was sent by gangster Lawrence Bishnoi to Canada and Thailand using the Hawala route. Now, it has already been established by the agency that Bishnoi, through his deputy, Singh, alias Goldie Brar, worked very closely with the Khalistani groups operating from Canadian soil. Now, Babar Khalsa international leader Lakibir Singh Landa was a particular mention in these transactions. The terrorist gangster and finance nexus was detailed in an NIA charge sheet filed in March against 14 people. The agency hasn't further elaborated on the gangsters and terrorists' investments in Canada. A senior officer has also said the ill-gotten money was invested in various properties, and efforts are on to identify all of those assets. And now we are coming back to our guest. Thank you for staying with us. Now, with the latest, how will the crackdown on the Khalistani terrorists be seen by countries like the US and Canada, where most of these terrorists reside and operate from?
Well, it's been for nearly 40 years that India has been asking the Canadian authorities for extraditing these terrorists, take action against them to ensure that there is no harm done to the Indian nationals or to the Indian diplomats. But it has been, unfortunately, not much action has been taken by the Canadians. We do also have an extradition treaty with them. We have a mutual legal assistance treaty with them. We work through Interpol together. We have an intelligence cooperation with them. But despite that, some of the Canadian leaders have chosen to ignore all our concerns, all our requests. While they think about their own sovereignty, they don't think about the sovereignty of other countries, which is directly impinging on India. And so, therefore, what India is doing today is, or of course, consistently we have to fight. We have been fighting against terror also for nearly 4 or 5 decades now, from across the border and from which has been generated through the support of countries like Canada, which were supplying assistance, providing all kinds of assistance and supplying them the requisite means to carry forward this. So this is something that we need to be, India is very careful. And India has also, if you remember, that at the United Nations, we had submitted a comprehensive convention for international terrorism. That's exactly because terrorism is not a single country's fight. It is a global fight, and the global solidarity is required. A terrorist is a terrorist. That's it. There is nothing further than that. And if you acknowledge it, and if you think that that should be the case, then you should take credible action against it. I mean, rather than shielding them. And this is precisely and unfortunately the stance of the Canadian government today is.
Right. Now, on that, what would be the legal challenges that the agencies can face on an international level, given that many of the terrorists operate from and are nationals of other countries?
Well, among diplomats, there are conventions which have to be respected. And this is something that one has to carry forward. I mean, that is very important. I mean, they need to execute their part of the end. If you have signed some agreements with a country, and if they don't do it, now then you can go to the International Court of Justice or raise those kind of issues. But that's long, prolonged processes, as you know. But in the meantime, by support or not taking any action against the terrorists, it emboldens them. Then, as far as the financing of terror, you listed out several of the incidents by Goldie Brar and others. There is the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, which is very much there. How is it not possible that they are now using it against these groups? I mean, even Canada, for that matter. I mean, if the kind of instances which exist there on the paper and the cases that India has taken up for repatriating or taking action against various terrorist and these extremist groups and the funding mechanisms which have a trail. Now, if that action is not taken, then they very much qualify for being in the grey list of the FATF.
Right. Thank you very much for being with us and your valued insights.
Thank you. Thank you.